The low, rhythmic clatter of the Boston-bound train had nearly lulled Rachel Taylor into a fragile moment of calm when it happened. A sharp, piercing wail that seemed to slice through the air like glass. Her 6-month-old son, Lucas, jerked in her arms, his little face scrunched in distress, lungs opening wide for another round of ear-splitting cries. Rachel instinctively cradled him tighter, gently bouncing him in the crook of her elbow, whispering broken pleas into his ear. "Baby, please." "Please," she murmured, but Lucas was inconsolable. Across the aisle, a man in a tailored charcoal suit closed his laptop a little too hard and shot Rachel a scowl. This was the fourth one. His eyes, sharp and irritated behind rimless glasses, practically screamed, "Control your child." He didn't need to say anything. His disgust was loud enough. Rachel looked away, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, the weight of judgment bearing down on her like the overstuffed diaper bag she carried. Lucas's cries only grew louder, drawing glances from two college-aged girls across the aisle and an elderly woman near the back, who clutched her purse as if the noise might spill into her handbag. The tension inside the train carriage was suffocating. Rachel's own tears threatened to spill as she rocked Lucas harder, desperate for some peace. For him, for herself, for everyone glaring at her like she was a walking inconvenience. It wasn't just the baby. It was everything. 3 job interviews, 3 rejections, all in one day, each rejection colder than the last. Her RA politely praised before they slid the final dagger. "Unfortunately, we've decided to move in a different direction." One even had the audacity to suggest she reapply when her home situation was more stable. Stable, as if she'd chosen instability. The train hurtled through the Massachusetts countryside, trees flaring with autumn gold and crimson outside the fog windows, but Rachel barely noticed the colors. Her mind spiraled. Rent was due in 5 days. The babysitter she could barely afford had to cancel again. She hadn't eaten since a gas station granola bar that morning. The world outside kept moving, oblivious, indifferent, while her life unraveled on a swaying train. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, and with Lucas squirming restlessly, she wrestled it free with one hand, hoping for something simple. A neighbor checking in about the mail. A missed alert from one of the job boards. Anything normal. Instead, an unfamiliar number lit up her screen. "I'm sitting behind you. Can I help?" Rachel blinked at the message, her mind blank for a second. Then her heart stuttered. She twisted slightly, her eyes scanning the rows behind her. 3 rows back. A woman in a sleek charcoal pantsuit caught her gaze and raised a hand in a small wave. Her expression was calm, almost apologetic, and she gave Rachel a tentative smile. Another message arrived. "Sorry if that was forward. I'm Janet Porter, CEO of Horizon Solutions. The conductor mentioned you're having a rough day." Rachel stared at her phone, disoriented. Horizon Solutions. That name rang bells. A tech giant. Something about AI and data infrastructure. But more than that, Janet Porter. She'd seen her in a Forbes article once. A self-made CEO who had built a $1 billion company from scratch. The photo in the article had shown a woman in a designer dress with sleek hair and commanding eyes. Rachel couldn't reconcile that image with the woman 3 rows back, whose makeup was minimal, whose ponytail was slightly crooked, and whose expression now looked more like concern than power. A strange blend of pride and panic surged in Rachel's chest. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard, trembling. "I don't need charity," she finally typed, the words clipped and defensive. Lucas wailed again. The businessman rolled his eyes loudly, as if she owed him silence. The air in the train seemed thinner with each passing second. Another message blinked into view. Not charity. Just a mom who gets it. Coffee in the dining car. My treat, no strings. Rachel hesitated. Every instinct screamed, don't go. It could be a trick, or a pity offer, or worse, a performance. Something this woman would tweet about later for clout. But the harder truth was that she was bone-tired, emotionally frayed. Lucas's screams were breaking her from the inside out, and the stares from the other passengers felt like open wounds. Fine, she typed back, jaw clenched. But I'll buy my own coffee. She gathered Lucas, strapped him snug into his chest carrier, and slung the diaper bag over her shoulder. As she moved through the narrow aisle, she passed the CEO, Janet, and caught the barest nod of respect in return. Not pity, not superiority, just acknowledgement. The dining car was half empty, smelling of burnt coffee and microwave, reheated pastries. Rachel slid into a window booth and bounced Lucas gently on her chest as he calmed to a low whimper. A few minutes later, Janet arrived, carrying 2 cups and a small tray of scones. She looked even more ordinary up close. Tired eyes, faint lines at her mouth, but something grounded in her presence. Not ordinary in the forgettable way, but in the real way. Your son's adorable, Janet said, sliding into the seat across from her. Has not usually this fussy. Rachel replied quickly, the words more defense than explanation. Janet's expression softened. My daughter Zoe hated trains. The engine noise drove her nuts until she was almost 2. I had to carry noise, canceling headphones just to get through a subway ride. Rachel gave a reluctant smile and sipped her coffee. It was better than she expected. Strong, not bitter. Lucas, exhausted from his tantrum, had finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. His tiny cheek pressed against her collarbone. So, Rachel asked cautiously, why is the CEO of Horizon Solutions texting strangers on trains? Janet chuckled, a low, unforced sound. Because I saw something in you. You were soothing your baby with one hand while blinking back your own tears. That's not weakness. That's strength. Rachel looked away, blinking hard. Her throat thickened. People always talk about resilience like it's glamorous, she said, staring out the window. But sometimes it's just surviving. I know, Janet said simply. Rachel hesitated, then found herself talking. The words came out in pieces, each one loosening the knot in her chest. She told Janet about finishing her business degree while pregnant, about Thomas walking out at 7 months, about job interviews that crumbled the moment she mentioned she had a baby. She talked about the online classes she juggled with late night feedings, the spreadsheet work she did freelance for companies that paid in peanuts, and the constant, grinding uncertainty. You finished a degree while pregnant and alone. Janet asked, clearly impressed. What was your focus? Marketing and data analytics? Janet's eyes sharpened with interest. She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward Rachel. We've been running a campaign for a new product line. Our team's stuck on the conversion data. Something's not adding up. Would you mind? Rachel blinked, surprised, but curiosity sparked. She took the phone and scanned the numbers, her mind falling into familiar rhythms. Your highest conversion rates are from 8 p.m. to midnight, she said slowly, but your ad budget is front, loaded into morning and early afternoon. And your East Coast and Midwest markets are performing twice as well as the West Coast, but your spend is evenly distributed. Janet stared at her. 3 analysts missed that. Rachel shrugged. You stop seeing patterns when you're staring at data too long. Fresh eyes help. The train began to slow as they neared the Boston station. Janet tucked her phone away and looked at Rachel with a new kind of seriousness. "We have an opening at Horizon," she said. "Flexible hours, on-site childcare, be perfect." Rachel's breath caught. The offer was surreal. Too fast, too big. She looked down at Lucas, who was finally sleeping peacefully. "I can't afford childcare," she said cautiously. "And most companies don't bend on schedules." Janet smiled. "We have a childcare center, on site, free for employees, certified staff, and remote options if you prefer working from home." A hope surged in Rachel's chest, but doubt chased it just as quickly. "Why me? You don't know me." "Not really." Janet's gaze softened, more personal now. 15 years ago, I was on a Greyhound with a colicky baby and no job. I thought my life was over. Someone gave me a chance. I'm just paying it forward. The train pulled into the station. The platform bustled outside, commuters gathering their bags and phones. Rachel sat frozen for a beat, her coffee cooling in her hands. Maybe this wasn't fate. Maybe it was earned. Maybe after everything, life was finally holding out a hand, not to save her, but to let her rise. And for the first time in months, Rachel let herself believe she could. Rachel stood outside Horizon Solutions' towering headquarters in Boston's Seaport District, her breath fogging in the morning air. Lucas slept soundly in the wrap pressed to her chest, his head nestled just under her chin, tiny fingers curled into her coat. The glass facade of the building reflected the rising sun in sharp angles, each pane glinting like a gate she wasn't sure she belonged to walk through. She checked the time, a fine 45 a.m. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted Lucas and pushed through the revolving door. Inside, the lobby was sleek and warm, buzzing with quiet purpose. Employees in smart, casual attire moved efficiently, tapping badges, sipping coffee, exchanging greetings. No one looked out of place. Rachel felt like a smudge on a clean white page. But then she saw Janet striding across the lobby in a tailored navy suit, a friendly smile in place that managed to settle Rachel's nerves just a little. "Morning," Janet said, offering a hand and then thinking better of it. She smiled down at Lucas. He made it through the commute like a champ. Rachel nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's out cold. Come on," Janet said, waving her forward. "Let me show you around." The tour was swift but thorough. High, ceilinged floors filled with creative energy, collaborative pods, quiet zones, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The building breathed with ambition. Janet paused outside a brightly colored room with playful murals and tiny tables. A caregiver waved from inside, rocking a toddler to sleep. "This," she said, "is the treehouse. On-site childcare, certified staff. 3-to-1 ratio. Free for employees." Rachel couldn't speak for a moment. Her throat tightened. Childcare had been the wall she kept running into. The reason she couldn't say yes to jobs, even when she got an interview. She felt a strange lump of hope forming in her chest. Still cautious, she followed Janet to her office, where they sat across from each other, a polished desk between them. "I looked through your resume again last night," Janet said, pulling up a document on her laptop. "UMass Amherst, top 15% of your class, focus in marketing and analytics. Freelance work with some impressive results. I was let go from my last job when they found out I was pregnant," Rachel said, her voice tight. "They called it restructuring." Janet didn't blink. "Sounds familiar." There was something about the way she said it, Not just sympathy, but shared history. I meant what I said on the train, Janet continued. You've got instinct. And what you pointed out in our campaign data, that saved us a huge chunk of budget. The position's yours if you want it. Rachel swallowed. What's the role? Marketing analyst. Remote first, flexible hours, full benefits. 85,000 starting. The number hit Rachel like a rush of wind. She tried not to show it, but the math danced through her head faster than she could catch it. Rent, groceries, savings, maybe even a car. Still, one question lingered. Why me? She asked again. There are others without my baggage. Janet leaned back slightly, her face unreadable. Because our mission isn't just innovation. It's humanity. Technology built by people who've lived real life. You bring more to the table than data skills. You bring insight and grit. Rachel exhaled slowly, almost laughing at the tension unraveling in her chest. But something still pulled at her. A voice that whispered, "It's too good to be true." I want to believe this is real, she said, but it feels almost like fate. Janet's gaze shifted slightly, something flickering behind her eyes. Then she said, "There's something I need to admit." Rachel tensed. Janet continued. 6 months ago, you applied to Horizon. You were one of our top candidates. But we couldn't reach you. Calls went to voicemail. Emails bounced. Rachel's heart skipped. I remember, she said. That was around the time Thomas left. I was still in Phoenix, barely holding it together. I must have missed the calls. It wasn't random that I recognized you on the train, Janet said quietly. It was full circle. Rachel looked down at Lucas, still sleeping peacefully against her chest. She had missed an opportunity once. But life had offered her a second chance. The next 3 weeks flew by in a blur. Each morning, Rachel and Lucas arrived at Horizon before 9. Lucas would babble contentedly as she walked him through the doors of the treehouse, where a warm, smiling caregiver greeted him like family. The moment she walked away, free hands, free mind, Rachel felt both liberated and slightly off balance, like she'd been carrying weight so long that she'd forgotten how to stand straight. Her work began with a campaign audit. She dove into spreadsheets, uncovered performance gaps, realigned ad spend, and modeled user behavior. Her suggestions boosted conversion rates by 22% in the first 2 weeks. Janet, usually reserved in praise, mentioned her by name in a team-wide email. That same afternoon, someone in the break room asked Rachel if she had a background in UX design. Another analyst asked if she wanted to collaborate on a cross-functional project. People were noticing, but not all the attention felt welcome. Sometimes, Rachel caught a glance that lingered too long. Hushed conversations would fall quiet when she entered the room. Even Janet, who had championed her so fiercely, watched her with a strange intensity, as if waiting for something. Rachel brushed it off at first. She was the new hire, and a single mom at that. Maybe people just weren't used to seeing babies in corporate life. Maybe she still felt like an outsider because, deep down, she hadn't stopped expecting the world to slam the door shut again. One Thursday evening, she stayed late, crunching numbers for a quarterly review. The office had emptied out, except for a few lights glowing in the distance. She clicked into a shared folder to double, check campaign details, and something unfamiliar caught her eye. An internal email about Horizon's annual autumn gala. It was a fundraising event for single-parent scholarships, featuring past photos and videos. Curious, she clicked a link. The video played a montage of the previous year's gala. Polished speeches, elegant dresses, live music, and smiling donors. Then a still photo appeared. Janet standing with a man in a navy suit, arms draped casually around her shoulders. The caption read, Janet Porter and Thomas Mercer, VP of Business Development, Horizon Solutions. Rachel's breath caught. Thomas. She stared at the photo. Her ex, the man who'd left her 7 months pregnant with a string of broken promises, smiling beside the woman who had taken a chance on her. Her mind reeled. Thomas had worked at Horizon. She hadn't known. He'd said something about joining a startup in Seattle, but she'd tuned him out after everything collapsed. Had Janet known who she was all along? Was this job a handout, a guilt offering? She began searching. A few quick queries later, she confirmed it. Thomas Mercer had been Horizon's VP until 2 years ago. He'd left for a rival firm in Seattle amid whispers of misconduct. Something about inappropriate behavior with staff. Nothing definitive but smoke. Her heart thudded. A shadow moved in her periphery. She turned. Janet stood in the doorway, working late. She asked, her tone unreadable. Rachel closed the window quickly but not fast enough. She stood. How well did you know Thomas Mercer? Janet exhaled and stepped into the office. Let's talk in private. They walked in silence to Janet's office. The city lights glittered beyond the tall windows as Janet closed the door. She didn't sit. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, Janet said quietly. I didn't know how. Rachel stood stiffly. Tell me now. Janet nodded. Thomas is my half-brother. We share the same father. I recognized you on the train from photos. He used to show them around the office, back when he was pretending to be a committed partner. Rachel felt dizzy. You knew. You knew who I was before you offered me the job. I did, Janet admitted. But I didn't hire you because of Thomas. He left Horizon after being reported for harassment. When I learned he abandoned someone pregnant, I felt responsible. So this was pity. Rachel's voice cracked. No. Janet's eyes were fierce now. It was accountability. But it was also admiration. You impressed me. On the train. With your mind. With your strength. If anything, I was scared you'd turn the offer down if you knew. You were right. A silence settled between them. It wasn't just about Thomas. It was about trust. From a shelf nearby, a baby monitor crackled softly. Lucas stirred, fussing from the treehouse's evening crib area. Janet glanced at the monitor. Go to him. Think about the offer. Don't decide now. Rachel left without another word. That night, as Lucas snored lightly beside her, Rachel lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Janet had known. She'd kept a secret, but had also opened a door. The job was real. The work was hers. And Lucas was thriving. But the question wouldn't let go. Could she accept this future if it was built, even partly, on someone else's guilt? In the morning, she had her answer. She arrived at Horizon early and asked to meet Janet in the conference room. When Janet walked in, Rachel handed her a folder. 10 pages outlining a new proposal to expand Horizon's support for working parents' mentorship, flexible tracks, family stipends, retention metrics, long-term ROI projections. I thought you'd quit, Janet said softly. Rachel looked her in the eye. Running would let Thomas keep power over my life. I'm not doing that. Janet sat down, flipping through the pages. Her expression shifted from wary to impressed. I want 3 things, Rachel said. Transparency. A leadership role in this project. And for Lucas to know Maya, his cousin. Janet looked up, a long moment passing between them. You have a deal. For the first time, it felt like the playing field was even. Not a favor. Not guilt. a mutual respect born of fire. They weren't just strangers on a train anymore. They were allies and family, in the most unexpected, messy, and beautiful way. Snow drifted in lazy spirals past the tall glass windows of Horizon's main event space, dusting the Boston skyline in soft white. Inside, the company's holiday party glowed with warmth. Gold string lights twinkling overhead, music playing at just the right volume, and the scent of spiced cider mingling with catered hors d'oeuvres. Laughter echoed from corners where clusters of employees and their families gathered, and a balloon artist twisted a butterfly for a giddy toddler near the dessert table. Rachel stood near the edge of the room. Lucas balanced on her hip in a tiny plaid shirt, his face painted with the same butterfly wings as the other kids. His giggle lit up her chest like a firework as he waved a candy cane at passing coworkers, fully unaware that he was, in a small way, the reason this entire party had shifted in meaning for so many. 3 months ago, she'd stepped into Horizon like a stranger crossing a threshold. Now she wasn't just another employee. She was a catalyst, a bridge, and most importantly, a mother who had stopped bracing for everything to fall apart. She sipped her cocoa slowly, letting the sounds around her wrap like a blanket. Content murmurs, the rustle of wrapping paper at the kids' corner, and the occasional pop of a photo booth flash. Her proposal to expand Horizon's parental support programs had launched a company-wide pilot just last month. New mentorship circles were forming. Remote flexibility had extended beyond policy into culture. Applications to open roles had surged by 19%, and satisfaction surveys told a clear story: people felt seen. Rachel didn't need public applause. She had Lucas reaching for more cookies and coworkers bringing their newborns to work without shame. That was her reward. She spotted Janet across the room near the fireplace, dressed in a midnight, blue sweater dress. Her daughter Maya nestled against her side. They were laughing with a designer from Creative, their ease so natural it tugged something in Rachel's chest. The first time she saw Janet on the train, she had been the CEO, a woman she couldn't imagine even having coffee with. Now, they had dinner most Fridays. Lucas and Maya played like siblings. And Janet wasn't just a powerful woman anymore. She was Lucas's aunt, and in her own way, Rachel's friend. As if feeling her gaze, Janet looked up and caught Rachel's eye. She made her way over, balancing 2 mugs. "I grabbed you cider this time," Janet said, handing her one. The cocoa line was a war zone. "Much appreciated," Rachel replied, taking the cup with a grateful smile. Lucas reached for Maya as she toddled over, her pigtails bouncing. He shrieked with delight as she squealed back, and they ran off toward the dance floor, which now served as a sticky terrain of toys, frosting, and a snow machine. "They're becoming inseparable," Janet said softly. Rachel nodded. "Like they know somehow." Janet glanced at her, then pulled something from her coat pocket, a folded piece of paper. "He emailed again," she said, not looking directly at Rachel. "Thomas." Rachel froze for a beat. She had braced for this moment, but it still hit like a jolt. "What does he want?" But Janet's voice was careful. "To see Lucas. Says he wants to make things right. He doesn't know you work here. I never told him." Rachel stared at the paper, her chest tight. She hadn't heard Thomas's name spoken aloud in weeks. She'd buried it, like an ugly relic from another life. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I believe he wants to ease his guilt," Janet said. "But wanting to be a father after the hard part is done, that's not the same as actually showing up." Rachel looked down at her son, who was now attempting to balance 2 cupcakes in one hand. Her heart ached. She had built a life for him out of scraps, held his head through fever nights, learned how to budget, soothe, negotiate, all with a baby on her chest and the world at her back. And now Thomas wanted to step in, after doing none of the work. "I'll respond," Rachel said, "for Lucas's sake. But on my terms." Janet nodded. "Whatever you need. I've got your back." The words settled deep, not just as comfort, but as truth. Later that evening, Rachel stepped away from the crowd and found herself standing before one of Horizon's glass walls, the city lights blinking far below. She could see her reflection there, Lucas asleep on her shoulder, the soft hush of his breath against her neck, and behind them, the gentle chaos of community. She thought about fate, not the fairy tale version, but the quieter kind. The kind that places someone behind you on a train. The kind that turns strangers into lifelines. The kind that leads you through fire to something better, not because you waited for it, but because you chose not to run. After the party, as Rachel buckled Lucas into his car seat, she paused, brushing snowflakes from his curls. He blinked up at her with those familiar hazel eyes. Thomas's eyes, but softer, kinder. She would write to him. Not to rekindle anything, but because Lucas would one day ask, and she wanted to answer with dignity, not silence. Over the next few weeks, January rolled in with icy mornings and long workdays, but Rachel found a rhythm. Her team had grown, and she'd been asked to lead Horizon's new initiative, Human First, a cross-department project focused on building humane tech culture. It wasn't just about childcare or flexible hours anymore. It was about rewriting the rules from the inside. Some days, she still doubted herself, still heard echoes of rejections in the back of her mind. But then she'd get a message from a junior staffer, thanking her for fighting for remote leave. Or she'd catch Lucas waddling down the treehouse hallway, calling for Auntie Janet, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's when she'd remember she belonged. Thomas's email had come with the usual language. Mistakes, regret, let's talk. Rachel's response was brief. She explained that Lucas was healthy and happy, that he didn't need saving, and that if Thomas truly wanted to be part of his life, he would need to start with time, not declarations. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no excuses, just acknowledgement, a promise to follow her lead. Rachel didn't trust it yet, but she didn't slam the door shut either. Meanwhile, Janet had opened up more. Over late dinners, she spoke of the years it took to rebuild her relationship with her father after he abandoned her and her mother, of learning to lead without imitating the men who'd once refused to promote her, of becoming a mother later than she expected, and the panic she'd felt when her daughter wouldn't sleep through the night. "You want to know the real reason I hired you?" Janet asked one night, stirring her tea. "Because I needed to believe someone like you could make it. Because if you could, it meant I hadn't forgotten what it was like to fight." Rachel had blinked back tears. "You didn't forget." Now, 3 months into her new life, she realized something deeper. This wasn't about second chances. This was about claiming the future instead of waiting for it to be offered. It showed up in small ways. The intern she mentored who confessed she was 3 months pregnant and terrified. Rachel took her to lunch and helped build a flex plan. The Zoom meeting where a male VP interrupted her twice, and she politely but firmly took back the floor. The morning she arrived late because Lucas was teething and didn't apologize. because caring for him was part of who she was, not something to hide. Janet never stopped watching. Not with doubt, but with pride. It wasn't spoken, but it was there, in the knowing nods, the invitations to planning meetings, the way she deferred to Rachel in front of executives. Janet had built the empire, but Rachel was shaping its heart. On a windy Friday evening in February, Rachel walked into her apartment and found Lucas standing on chubby legs, holding Maya's hand as she babbled instructions. They were building a tower out of cereal boxes and board books. Janet looked up from the couch with a grin. "You're late," she teased. "They've already started their own architectural firm." Rachel dropped her bag and laughed. "I'll just invest now while the buy-in's cheap." They ate takeout, shared wine, and when both kids were asleep in a pile of blankets, they sat in the quiet. "You ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been on that train?" Rachel asked. Janet looked thoughtful. "I used to believe in pure chance, but now, I think people cross paths for a reason. I saw myself in you. And I saw someone who didn't flinch when I was a mess," Rachel said. "That was new." Janet smiled softly. "We're not always given family who show up. Sometimes we have to find them." Rachel nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad I found you." There was a long silence, not awkward, just full. Then Janet raised her glass. "To chosen family." Rachel clinked her glass against hers. "To the future we build ourselves." And as snow fell once again outside, as two toddlers dreamed under the glow of nightlights, two women sat in the quiet strength of something rare. Not rescue, not redemption, but real partnership. Forged not in ease, but in shared resolve, not strangers anymore, not even just co-workers, but the kind of family that chooses each other and chooses to rise.